Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time there lived a king and queen who had no children. Not a day passed that the queen did not say, "If only we had a child." One day, as the queen was walking beside the river, a little fish lifted its head out of the water and said, "Dear queen, your wish shall be fulfilled. You will soon have a daughter." What the fish foretold came true. The queen had a little girl who was so beautiful that the king never tired of looking at her, and in his great joy he ordered a magnificent feast to be prepared. He invited all his relatives, friends, and neighbors, and the fairies as well, in order that they might be kind and good to his little daughter and bless her. Now there were 13 fairies in his kingdom. But since the king had only 12 golden plates for them to eat from, one of the fairies was not invited and had to stay at home. All the others came, and after the feast was over, they gave their best gifts to the little princess. One gave her virtue, another beauty, and a third riches, and so on, till she had everything she could ever wish for or need. After the 11th fairy had blessed the princess, the 13th fairy came in. She was burning with anger because she had not been invited to the feast, and was determined to have her revenge. So without so much as looking at anyone there, she cried out in a loud voice, "The princess shall prick herself with a spindle in her 15th year and fall down dead." Everyone in the great hall was terror-stricken at this, and the 12th fairy, who had not yet blessed the princess, came forward. She told them that though the evil wish had to be fulfilled, she could soften it. "The princess shall not die," said the 12th fairy, "but shall fall into a deep sleep that will last 100 years. The king, however, hoping to save his dear child from the dreadful misfortune, ordered all the spindles in the kingdom destroyed at once. Meanwhile, as time passed, all the fairies' gifts were fulfilled. The princess was so beautiful and so virtuous, so kind and so wise, that she was loved by everyone who saw her. Now it happened that on the very day that the princess was 15 years old, the king and queen were not at home, and she was alone in the palace. She spent the time wandering through the rooms by herself, looking at everything, until she came to an old tower. A winding staircase led to a little door in the tower, and in the door was a golden key. When the princess turned the key, the door opened, and there sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning flax. "Good day, Granny," said the princess. "What are you doing there?" "I'm spinning," said the old woman, and nodded her head. "What is this little thing that turns round so merrily?" asked the princess, and she took the spindle and tried to spin too. But the instant she touched it, the curse was fulfilled, and she pricked her finger with the spindle. A moment later the princess fell down upon a bed and lay quite still in a deep sleep. The sleep extended over the whole palace. The king and queen, who had just returned home, and all the court fell asleep too. The horses slept in the stables, the dogs in the courtyard, the pigeons on the roofs, and the flies on the walls. Even the fire on the hearth died down and went to sleep, and the meat stopped roasting, and the cook, who was at that moment pulling the kitchen boy's hair for something he had done, let him go, and both fell asleep. And the wind was so quiet that not a leaf rustled on the trees around the castle. Everything stood still, and everyone slept soundly. A thick hedge of thorns soon grew around the castle, and every year it grew higher and higher, until at last it hid the whole palace from view. Not even the flag on the tower could be seen. But the story of the beautiful sleeping Briar Rose, for that was the name of the princess, went throughout the country, and from time to time several princes came and tried to make their way through the thicket to the palace. They never succeeded, for the briars and thorns held them as if by hands, and the princes were unable to free themselves. After many, many years, a prince came into the country from another land. He heard an old man tell the legend of the thicket of briars and thorns, and how a great castle stood behind it, in which slept a wonderfully beautiful princess, and with her the king, the queen, and all their court. He related, too, how a great number of princes had tried to break through the thicket, but had been held fast. Then the young prince said, "All of this does not frighten me. I will go and see this hedge of briars for myself." The old man advised against it, but the prince would not listen. Now, on that very day, the 100 years were over, and as the prince came to the thicket he saw nothing but flowering shrubs, through which he passed easily, and which closed behind him as firm as before. In the courtyard he saw the horses and the dogs lying asleep, and on the roof sat the pigeons with their heads under their wings, and when he came into the palace he saw the flies sleeping on the walls, and the cook in the kitchen was still holding up her hand to strike the boy, and the maid sat with the fowl which she had been plucking still in her hand. The prince went on and saw the king and queen asleep on the throne room, and he went on still farther, and all was so still that he could hear his own breathing, until at last he came to the old tower. He went up the steps to the door, opened it with the golden key, and saw the princess lying asleep on the bed. She was so beautiful that he could not take his eyes from her, and he stooped and gave her a kiss. The moment he touched her, Briar Rose opened her eyes and smiled lovingly at him. Then they went down out of the tower together, and the king and queen awoke, and all the court awoke too, and they gazed at each other in great wonder. The horses stood up and shook themselves, and the dogs ran about and barked. The pigeons lifted their heads from under their wings, looked round them, and flew off over the fields. The flies on the walls buzzed away. The fire in the kitchen blazed up and cooked the dinner, and the roast meat turned round again. The cook gave the boy a slap so that he cried out, and the maid went on plucking the fowl. Then the wedding of the prince and Briar Rose was celebrated with pomp and splendor, and they lived happily together all the rest of their lives.